wise man once said, "A naked woman in heels is a beautiful thing. A naked man in shoes looks like a fool." And that wise man is Mr. Christian Louboutin sitting in the front there. The star shoe designer whose designs are immediately recognizable for its tantalizing red heels. He's a dapper, mischievous, and warm, with a penchant for fedoras, bow ties, and drama, 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 as you just saw. It is no wonder Mr. Louboutin has topped the Luxury Institute's annual luxury brand status index for 3 years, his shoes being declared the most prestigious women's shoes. Like all obsessions, his too was seated in a particular childhood memory. During a visit to the Museum of African Art in Paris, he saw a sign with a high heel in profile and a red cross across it to indicate wearing stilettos was not allowed. It fueled his imagination, and he started an empire. All over Bombay, women are rejoicing, and husbands are weeping sweet tears of sorrow, as in a week he opens his flagship store in a heritage building in Horniman Circle. India is a country he loves deeply. He traveled here when he was 15, and he comes here every year. To the delight of his Indian fans, he created Bollywood-inspired shoes, which he called Bollywoody, and Devidas, a little play on the words there. He collects Indian film posters. He has even appeared in a Bollywood film as an ice cream vendor. Christian Louboutin is worn by some of the most beautiful women on the planet, and his red sole shoes have become a byword for international glamour and luxury. He's theatrical, a show guy, and his success rests on his ability to make his shoes the heroines in a drama of life, love, and longing. He has dedicated his life to creating designs that are stunningly sculpted and sexy, but more importantly, he has devoted his life to the eternal quest that has flummoxed most men in the world. What do women really want? Please join me in welcoming Christian Louboutin, the man who knows how to steal every woman's heart and her soul. How is it possible that a small object like a shoe can have so many design nuances?
Well, I think for design, there is not such thing as scale. You know, for instance, as we're in India, I was very, very surprised, and it looks very pretentious because I'm not thinking that architecture has to see with shoe design, but when I first came to the Taj Mahal, I thought it was very tiny. And when I arrived, and from far, it still looks tiny, and then when you approach it, you see it's a huge building. I think that in matter of proportion, when the proportions are right, small, big, it doesn't really matter. But also a small object can contain a lot of things in it. So I've never seen a problem with the size of the shoe.
When you look at the shoe, I'm sure you look at all the elements, right? Because collection after collection, he has to reimagine the shoe.
Well, a shoe, as you were saying, is a small object, but when I'm designing a shoe, the first thing I'm thinking, I'm designing shoes which can be very embellished and sort of complicated with a lot of ornaments, etc. But I always start by one thing, which is called the last. The last is the body of the shoe. And if you do a good last, meaning a good proportion of last, any type of embellishment is going to be fine after. But let's say that the last is a bit like the face. If you do a beautiful face, if you add makeup on, well, it can be even more, it can be even better, but you still have to have the correct face. So it's really a matter of proportion between the heel, the face, etc., the front, etc.
Just for the audience, the last is which part of the shoe?
No, the last is when you build a shoe, it's actually, you build the shoe on the last.
Okay, let's talk about the language of legs, because you are obsessed with legs. How does the anatomy of the body and the length of the leg correlate to the designing of a shoe?
Well, first, I started my company now 21 years ago.
Right.
And for the first 2 years, I was selling, I started with a shop in Paris, and for 2 years I was selling in the shop. So I've been doing something, I did a lot of observation of women trying on shoes. And when a woman is trying on a pair of shoes, she puts it on, she stands up, she goes in the mirror, and she looks at herself. She looks at her breast, she looks at her ass, she turns, she looks, and if she pleases herself, then she considers the shoes. So what I mean by that is that a shoe is definitely the last point, the last continuation of the body. But it's not that someone is doing, okay, I like, done. Never, never. I saw it once, and she was a very sad person. But if you do like yourself, you actually look at yourself in the mirror, and this is what you consider yourself. So all this to say is that it's only the last tip of the body, but it's not an element which is not fading in the body, in the shape of the woman.
So in terms of design, what is so special about the Christian Louboutin shoe?
Well, first of all, I don't know. But I just like to do them. But probably I have to say something. Many people are asking me sometimes, why a shoe, why this pump, which is a high heel, simple high heel, is very expensive compared to another one, which is really cheaper in terms of price. And so here comes a question where I understand that sometimes it's complicated to see with little elements why something is expensive versus something which is not. So I'm going to give you an example. And it's all this to say that in a shoe, my shoe, I have a huge attention to details. Some details you do see, some details you do not see. And you don't need to see them, but it's when you put it on that you do understand, you do see, you do feel the difference. But to give you an example, because I think that everybody understands that much quicker than shoes. You take 2 bottles of wine.
Right.
It's the same shape. It's the same content. It's 75 millimeters or centiliters or whatever. There is like a difference in the name. Okay, Chateau Puissant and Petit Nicolas, for instance. One can be very expensive. The other one is going to be cheap. Everybody understands the difference between a good wine and a bad wine. It's inside, but also it's a detail. It's everything which is coming before. So it's a bit the same thing.
You know, we are always told as women that, my gosh, you're wearing heels, they look so uncomfortable. You've always pushed the limits of, you know, you take it to extreme levels sometimes, women still love it. How do you maintain that level of comfort? Because, you know, it's one thing to sit in a badly designed chair, but it's completely different if you're wearing shoes that pinch or hurt you. It's almost impossible to walk. So how do you maintain that level of comfort?
Well, my work is being a designer. That's what I do, and that's what I like to do. And for that, I also slightly consider myself as a doctor with tricks which don't need to be said, but also what I mean by that is that my design are not about being comfortable. This is the back of it where you have to work in the engineering. But when you do a design, well, that's my approach. Everybody's different on that. But I'm happy if a woman looks at my shoe and says, it looks beautiful. I wouldn't be that happy that a person looks at it and says, oh my God, it looks so comfortable. You see, design have different perception. If you look at something and you say, my God, how comfortable it looks, what is going to be the design? I don't think it's going to be my type of design. But you know, you need everything in the world. So, but all this to say that technically it's challenging to do very high, something which you don't look comfortable, where you still have to put a bit of comfort. But these are my little secrets. I shouldn't speak about that. It's super boring on the top of that.
We are never bored with you, Christian, never. You've also said, I want to talk about the psychology of the shoe. And you've said that shoes are less interesting for their physical properties than for the psychological ones. What is the psychology of your shoe?
Well,
of course, we know it's sexy.
I do a collection every 3 months, so I'm having a lot of different type of shoe in a way. But what I mean by that is that a shoe reveals a lot of, only when people are into their shoes, I have to say. If someone is not interested at all, then it's difficult for me to read, but definitely a shoe reveals a part of the personality of everyone. But I think it's very, very normal. But also, you know, in the shoe, there is one thing which is very important. It's just arriving on the foot, but it sort of irradiates the whole body. You know, it's just here, but then it's going to come all the way up, because in a way, it's going to change your posture, right. The way you're going to stand, and also the way you're going to walk. And on that, it's a small object, but it takes the whole body.
You've also been a little philosophical about it. Said, you know, when you've said this, that when you wear heels, then you slacken the pace in life. So when I read it, I was very curious, and we would love to know, what do you mean? When you're wearing heels, you slacken. It sounds very zen for high heels.
You know, it's funny how much for instance, after 9/11, I had a lot of buyers coming, and they were looking at the collection, and they were telling me, well, you know, with what happened, we just want little heels. I said, okay, yeah. I was trying to understand, and so it was meaning that there was this thing that which was scary for people, so people wanted to imagine that they could run, so they would run on smaller heels. I think, you know, it's not going to make any difference if you're on 5 inches or 2 inches. If something happens on you, it's not going to be But I did understand that it's a perception that people would have. Anyway, that's one thing with the heel. It slows your pace, and I think there is nothing wrong with that, because people often also, women would come in the store and say, I can run in those shoes. And so I had so many people saying, I can run in these shoes. So one day I decided to take a stool. I was in Paris, and to be on a stool in the street. And actually I moved to a coffee after very quickly. I looked stupid on the stool. And so I went to this coffee and I tried to see people running. And I haven't seen one person running the whole day. Nobody runs all the time, you know. So it's this weird perception about running that you don't need to run. And you know, you run to the airport. So one day this woman arrives and she thanked me because she explained, she says, you know, thanks to you, I realized that my street is a beautiful street in Paris. She lives Rue Grenelle. And I said, what? She said, you know, now I take the time to walk normally instead of being like this with the head like a bull and going straight. And she said, I actually saw that my street has beautiful building because now that I'm taking the time and I have to take the time, I look around me. And I think that in a way, slowing pace, you know, everybody goes at the end, it's the same tunnel, you know, we all sort of die at one point. So it's better to take the time to see what happened on your right, on your left. Take the pace of your time, take the time, and then you see more things. People will be more, you are more approachable. So I think that you don't need to think that you need to run all the time. I just don't think, and I think that everything which is slowing your pace in a way is a good thing.
I believe that's so too. Going back to, of course, the one design element in your shoe that changed the fortunes of your company, the red lacquered sole, and you can talk about it later with the audience, but I want to know, you've never marketed your brand in the traditional way that a luxury brand does, neither have you advertised. How's that?
I never thought about that, but the thing is that I didn't, how can I say, I wanted to design my shoes. So in order to be able to design my shoes, I had to build a company, which I did, with Bruno, my business partner who's here. But I never really wanted to have a company. I didn't have a dream of having a company. And I think that when your thing is to do what you like, your designs, you're not considering your design as a product. And if you're not considering, it's basically you doing a thing. So when you're not considering what you do as a product, it ends up that there is nothing to do marketing around. You know, marketing is an idea that you have to give an identity to one thing, which is not existing. You have to decide to, I don't know, because I don't do marketing. I don't really know what it is, but I guess that it's trying to proper an identity on something which has no identity. And so, but my problem hasn't been that, because I'm trying to do shoes and I'm not trying to put any fake identity on it. My first job, this is why there was Dita on stage. My first job really, when I was a teenager, I wanted to design shoes for showgirls, music hall girls. And so here's one, the burlesque artist Dita was there. And so that was my thing as a teenager. So in fact, I've been trying to do this since.
You know, we know that you love dancers. You know, he curated a beautiful show in Crazy Horse, the phenomenal burlesque cabaret in Paris. I was lucky enough to see it. And you've always said, you know, no one wears my shoes like a dancer on stage. I think we would love to know, what was that influence, apart from the fact that what is it about the dancer and the way she holds the shoe in her leg?
Well, first of all, a shoe for dancers is a very important element because they dance, they go down the stairs. My first thing was really dancers, but also the dancers from the music hall. So in Paris, you have those, all the classical music halls, you have those big stairs, and you have to go down the stairs. And it's a very complicated thing as a dancer. You know, the big thing of a dancer is to know how to go down the stairs properly. Why? It's because in real life, if you go downstairs, you look at your feet and you look at the stairs. But in the cabaret life, you look in front, you smile, and you don't know where are your foot going. So you do this and you bang it, but you still have to look and smile. So it's a very different thing. So it's really an exercise. So for that, dancers know very well, use the shoes, but they still, once they have it on, they shouldn't exist anymore. It's all about them. And also, the good thing with dancers, it's that it's not about the shoe. It's really about, nobody looks at the shoe of a dancer. You just look at the person. You just look at the evolution of the person. But still, the shoe is very important. So for me, the shoe is always at the service of the woman and not the opposite. So for that, dancers is a very good example for that for me.
We've always known that, you know, you bring a lot of emotion to your design. And, you know, he started this amazing project called the Tattoo Parlor, where if you have a tattoo on your body, like your insignia, you can have it transferred with embroidery on your shoe. This is incredibly out-of-the-box idea and brilliant. How did you come about that?
Well, it actually was to do a present. I had this friend who had tattoos, and the first tattoo actually has been done in India, was made in Chennai. And so the embroidery was done by Jean-François Lesage, and it was a tattoo of this friend of mine. So we took the drawing and tattooed it on the shoe. So it was a very personal present. And thinking of that, I sort of thought about tattoo. I don't have tattoo, actually. But it can be, but I like them and it can be very nice. But a lot of people, when they have tattoos, they're very emotional and it's very much like the map of their own history. Right. You know, it's like their own territory. And I was 14, I did that. I should have not done that. It's so ugly. I was into Mickey Mouse. I was 17 and I have this Mickey Mouse here. If I could erase it, I would be very happy. This one I like, this is my mother's name, etc. So in a way, it's very personal. So I noticed that a lot of people had those slippers with like a skull or like monograms, but in fact, so tattoo are your own monograms. Nice. So the idea is to have a bespoke that's for men, but women did it too now. We do it for women, that's what I mean. And so instead of having sort of fake monogram or your fake armories, you have your own armories, your own crest. Your tattoo is becoming your thing on the shoe.
And that's for both men and women.
That was first for men, but then I had some women coming and say, why for men and not for women? And I said, well, yes, there is no reason, you're right, so for you too, no problem.
So, you know, talking about your ideas and thinking out of the box, we hear that you're starting a beauty line. And, you know, we've always known that your shoes have a transformative power over women. How does beauty come into your design world?
You know, when you're designing a thing like a shoe, which is again a small thing, funny enough, I realized that that little universe, that little environment can be transported in other things. there is what is called the DNA of either your brand, either your work, etc. And again, it's not a thing that I didn't know. It's a bit like marketing, but I'm more interested in the DNA of things than in the marketing of things. And so I had a lot of one important element in my, not in my design because it's been a design, but now it's done in a way, it's a trademark, is the red soul. So bringing this red soul element could easily go to different places. So that's one thing. But also, I always liked very much the whole cosmetic thing because shoes is something which is very empowering to women. And it's the same thing with everything which has to do with the cosmetics. So it's actually a quite natural, not transformation, but in a way evolution, probably is the name, right, for extension, I guess, of the shoe. But I can talk about that because it's not a surprise, but I have, well, I'm supposedly secret about that till the end of 2013.
Yesterday when we were chatting, you showed me something about the watch. Would you like to tell the audience?
No, yes, well, that's an example. You know, it's this company called Toy Watch which sent me that watch, and so they sent me two watches. One is black, and the back of it is red, and then one is red, and the back of it is black. So it's just meaning that sometimes design are in a very specific class, but you can rethink it in a different way, and it becomes, with the essence of a design or an essence of an idea, can be completely transformed into another territory. And that's an example.
Right. Christiane, we know that you love India. We know you come and do a lot of embroidery work here. In fact, you're one of the few designers who will actually announce how much you love Indian embroiderers and you do your work here. How do you manage to use such local skills, local artisan skills, and give it this sort of a platform in an international level? Yesterday we were talking about how you love the memory of a certain art form, not the literal. Mm-hmm. I would love it if you could share that with the audience.
No, I think that for me, one of my most important things for my work has been traveling. The influence of traveling in my work has always been present. And that when you're a designer and your design goes through the world, you know, it's not because I'm traveling in India now that suddenly in a year all of my shoes should be completely Indian. It doesn't really make any sense. I think that what is nice is that when you have influence, just like mixed blood, you know, you go, you see, you look at things, and then all these influences are staying in yourself and then come out in a different way. And for instance, when I'm designing, thank God I have still good eyes. I have to wear glasses now, but I still have good eyes. And I look at things, but then after it stores in my memory, and then at one point when I'm designing, things are coming out straight from my memory and I'm starting to design. I do not really work with documents. And the reason is I think that when you see things, everybody is influenced by tons of things. But it's better to digest them. When you're designing, it's better to digest things. Because then anyone can see the same exhibition. But if you take the document of an exhibition and then you recopy it, many people could do exactly the same thing. If you're just inspired by this exhibition, it goes through your memory, and then outside your memory, it gets digested, it comes out with your hands. It becomes your really design. And that's why I don't keep documents. I do some pictures. I barely look at them, but you never know. But in fact, I always look at things, but it's coming out only from my memory. And an example, I started the red soul because of one shoe called the Pensée. So it's a high heel Mary Jane with a sort of big flower outline. And it's called the Pensée because I was thinking of a painting of Andy Warhol called Flowers. And so I was thinking Andy Warhol, flowers, etc. So I designed that shoe, and I did not look at the painting. And that's important. That's why I'm saying that. I did not look at the painting. I thought, okay, flowers is really those bright colors with this big outline. It's three petals, etc. So I designed the shoe, and when I designed the shoe and liked it, and added that soul, etc., I looked at the painting, and the painting has nothing to say. First, it was absolutely not same colors. It's not 3 petals, it's 4 petals. It's a square flower. Mine is completely round, there is no outline. But I'm happy about that, because if I had had the picture with me, I would have reproduced something which would not be me. So in fact, this is why it's very important that the memory, you know, your eyes, which only belongs to you, let it free. And everything which goes through your eyes has to go through your brain instead of staying in front of your eyes.
So
does it make sense?
It made absolute sense.
Okay.
So taking this thought further, now that you have a beautiful boutique opening in Bombay, right? Where do you bring local and global? What have you done within the store that is this assimilation of what you've seen?
One big influence in my work is artisanal, handicrafting. And my father was a cabinet maker, so he was doing small models of furniture. I never saw his atelier, but he sort of like, he spoke about it very much. So I realized that the influence of my father about everything which is handicraft, art and craftsmanship is very important, and but also when you have a line which is a global line in a way, still I am very happy to have not what I would call an experience. It's more important than an experience, but like almost like a laboratory. I always let the possibility in my designs, in my collection, to have something which can be done only by maybe 1, 2, or 3 people out of one country, and or one person who's able to paint a specific thing, and then it's a small addition. But first of all, it's very nice. But I think that artisanal is a very important thing. It's a very, very important thing. It's so linked to important cultures, and it says so much about people, and you learn a lot from that. And so I always like to work with artisanals. For instance, in the store here in Mumbai, we've been working with Indian artisanship who've been mixing. So it's an Indian technique that I had seen for the first time here in Mumbai, and it's embroidery on wood. So it's those wood which are hammered, drilled, and then after you have those threads of thick cotton. And they also did it in metal, so which is a thing we are going to try to experience. So it's when I design a store in a country, I always try to have, well, I don't always try. I definitely take elements of the country. So I'm not saying that the Bombay store is an Indian store, but it's definitely some things are done which are only done in India, but also it's in a way my vision of a certain type of Indian craftsmanship.
So talking about the sort of localized flavor, let's go back to the psychology of the shoe. We were, again, on your last visit to India, we were talking about when women of course we all love the shoe very much, but how we consume the design eventually goes back to a very collective, ancient memory. And you were talking specifically about, let's say, the way the Japanese ladies are buying shoes. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to talk about the French, because I think it's a great story that the audience would love to, your observation.
Mm-hmm. Now, yes, one of my favorite experiences was to sell in my own store, and because I've been learning a lot of things. And so, yeah, the approach through different countries, through different cultures, the approach of shoes is very different. And I had noticed that's, I think, what you're telling me. I had noticed that Japanese women, for instance, I mean, there is an element which is very sexual in shoes, in women's shoes, and but even it's not only in the design, but it's where is niched the sexuality in different cultures. For instance, Japanese women, I would always see that when they were trying on a pair of shoes, they were always doing this and hiding the ankles. And actually, in Japanese poetry, the ankle, the woman ankle, is a very erogenous
Yes.
part of the body. So it's a very sexual part of the body. So they don't mind showing their feet, but they would not show their ankle. And this is why, for instance, Japanese women wear anytime, on any climate, a lot of boots, It's actually to hide something which is considered almost too sexy to be shown to anyone. And so in different cultures, you do see that also the idea of, for instance, when this part of a shoe is called the cleavage, that part, the first part in the front. And so it makes reference to the first cleavage of a woman, which is this one.
Right.
And so I always like very, very low cleavage. So it reveals that part, actually, that part of the feet.
I'm not revealing too much then.
No, because you have long toenails. And it's funny because a lot of women I would notice would say, oh my God, there is something very, I feel naked in these shoes. I said, well, nothing wrong to feel naked anyway, but you know, it's okay. And they would say, no, I really feel naked. There is not enough shoes. And so, but it's actually not, how can I say, it's an evocation of nudity, because the same person would have a sandal. So you see all the foot, you know, the surface which is naked is much more important. The person has no problem with that. So, you know, definitely through the design, there is an evocation of nudity when sometimes it's actually covering most of your foot. So again, I don't know if it makes any sense.
It makes absolute sense.
Okay, good.
And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions coming your way. I think you may just have answered this question, which I love, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's a beautiful quote from him. A good shoe is one that doesn't dress you, but undresses you. You explained once. How do you create this aura of something illicit or forbidden via design?
Well, there are two ways to do shoes. Some shoes are dressing you, and some shoes are undressing you. For the first maybe 5 years, I was really, of me designing shoes, I was really more into dressy shoes. And, you know, because it's a small element, you do a lot, etc. So it's more, there is a lot of detail. But then I added to that the opposite idea, which I love, is that, you know, a shoe can appear, but also should be able to disappear. And so when a shoe completely disappears, when the design completely disappears, it leaves a space to the whole body. And, you know, everything which has to see with the feminine body should be that way, you know, should be, I think, it should reveal and sometimes able to hide also, but it should be able to be there and to not to be there. You know, it still should remain.
Is this the reason why you did that capsule collection, the nudes, where the shoe
Yes.
becomes an extension of the same skin tone as, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I did this, I just started this little collection of cold nudes, and it's coming from the fact that one day I was showing, in the collection I was showing a beige shoe, and I was showing it to buyers, and I was saying, okay, this is a nude, etc. And then this girl came and said, she was working with me, and she said, she was sort of crying a bit. And I said, what has happened to you? And she said, well, you call that shoe nude, but I disagree, you know, this is not the color of my flesh. I said, what do you mean? She says, nude for you is only that color, but if you put it on me, you're going to see it's not nude, it's beige. And she was black. And I realized that she was completely right, and that nude is for, if you're a French person, you expect nude to be beige. And it's almost like a racist issue. It's not that much, but you know, in a way it is. And so I thought she was perfectly right, so I decided to go through different color schemes and have all the nudes. So in fact, you can have these shoes, these different shoes corresponding to the color, approaching the color of your skin. So when you put it on, it sort of vanishes and it fades in your silhouette.
My last question, because I can hear the music, I've been told. To what lengths do women go to buy, beg, borrow, steal a pair of Louboutin?
Well, ask, I don't know.
I know a story about a lady in Dallas.
Okay.
Who went to jail.
Yes, she went to jail for. I met this woman in Dallas. I'm doing sometime what's called a personal appearance. So you come and you sign the shoes, etc. And there was this very nice woman, and she was a very, very big, obviously a very big client of mine. And she was Texan, and she said, when I go in your shoes with the little thing in the front like that, I'm sure I want to be the last one to arrive to the church, so everybody sees me walking in my shoes. And she was very, very funny and very, very sweet. So 3 or 4 years after, I came back at the same place, and I said, where is the woman in her shoes at the church? And they said, oh God, you know. I said, she had an accident or something. And they told me that she went in jail because she actually was sort of stealing the money of a company she was working in. It was going straight to my store. I've sent her a pair of shoes in jail, I have to say.
Brilliant. We will open to the audience if you have any questions for Christian.
Has it ever happened you've regretted seeing a woman wearing your shoes, wishing that I hope she would not worn my shoes instead?
No, because, my design is an extension of myself, but when it's done, and I like very much to see people. Sometimes, I'm designing shoes and I'm thinking it would look good with this and that, etc. But when people buy it, it's their own thing, and they have, they have the possibility, and they definitely have the right to do anything with, it's their own. And I like to be surprised by what people do with one design, transform it into for themselves. And more it's approaching your own personality, better it is. So even if I don't really like the way it is, I think it doesn't really matter. As long as a person is happy, that's what contents me.
I have a couple of questions. I'm going to stick to just 2. My first question is, what were the challenges that confronted you when you first started your own label, and how did you overcome them? And another question is, how do you keep your ideas fresh?
In the fridge. For the second.
How do you keep your ideas fresh?
But the first question was?
What were
the challenge.
Challenges?
I've been very fortunate, I have to say, because I just started with the help of my 2 best friends, oldest friend, Bruno, who is here, and Henri, who is not here. And I was 26, and so we started the company. And I didn't have to think about anything but my design. And I had not realized that it was a full business. Bruno, who was taking care of that side, had been really helpful, definitely helpful, but also he sort of didn't tell me that it was not working for a while, for 1 year. And so I was quite protected by that. And then after it started, but my biggest challenge it's been after years actually, and it's to remain free. When you start a company, there is always a moment where you may be scared, etc., and then you have people approaching you to probably buy a part of your company. And so it's been fought, but I immediately thought that it would be a bad idea. But it's a challenge to remain free, because sometimes it's more complicated, but I think that your design remains fresh if you remain free. So it goes back to your second question. And I think that the freshness is that the enthusiasm that you can keep when it's your own company, because you feel free, you do whatever you want, is a very important thing. And definitely for me, it's been very important. Thank you.
I have a question about the psychology of shoes. Can you tell us a little bit about the psychology of studs that you're both wearing?
Psychology of studs. Well, studs, funny enough, for instance, is in a way quite considered as something gothic. So there is this idea that black leather with silver stud is something like rock and roll. But in the element of studs, there is also something which is very on the side of decoration and decorative. It goes in furniture at the medieval period, etc. So some little elements like this can be transported in different type of symbolism. That one can be completely sort of rock and roll idea, but if you take it with different material on things, it can seem completely different. So well, there is nothing as symbol of studs, but it can be perceived in different way. And I like the idea that such a small element can carry you in different type of lands in a way.
Hi, Christian.
Hello.
I was wondering, what is your greatest challenge in designing men's shoes vis-a-vis women's shoes?
It's a total different type of design. You know, again, you know, it starts by psychology. Men have a different attitude with their shoes. Men have almost more of a feminine attitude with their shoes, when women have a more butch attitude with their shoes. You know, it's pretty rare that women are like polishing their shoes. Okay, they store it maybe, but they don't do more than that. Men are really like, they look at the shoes, they polish it every Sunday, they put the milk, etc. You know, they're much more delicate. They see shoes as an object, but they don't see shoes as an aspect of themselves completely. Again, you know, a man naked in shoes looks less good than a woman naked with shoes. And so it's a very different approach. And also about if I look at a piece of fabric, for instance, I have to be in one state of mind or another state of mind. When I'm designing shoes, I'm quite focused on the man. Meaning, if I look at this, if I look it on, I have my man point of view, it's going to be different. If I look it for a girl, I'm going to do, okay, I could do a bow, I can drape it, etc. Just a piece of fabric. The same piece of fabric for a man, it's going to be maybe too flat, too small, not thick enough. So definitely it's a completely different state of mind when you're designing men's shoes and women's shoes. The only thing that I bring together is that the fact that you can have a lot of fun elements on it. But definitely when I'm working for men, I can only do men for a certain time, a certain amount of time. And then I switch to women. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.